Everyone thought it was just another letter, but when I held that envelope in my hands, I felt something shift inside me. The paper was heavy, almost deliberate, as if it carried more than words. For 12 years I had lived in this neighborhood, peacefully paying dues on time, keeping my property neat, respecting every rule they threw at us. And yet on that Tuesday morning in March, as the Florida sun rose over Lake Harmony, I realized something dark had been set in motion. I poured my coffee, sat at the table, and stared at the letterhead of the HOA. My gut twisted. Somehow I knew it would not be good. When I opened it, I almost laughed at the absurdity. They called my boat an aesthetic disturbance, a problem. As if the sight of a 35-foot fishing vessel that had been parked neatly in the marina for more than a decade was ruining property values. I read the words again and again. Remove it within 28 days or face enforcement action. Enforcement action. Over a boat that had brought my family joy and had never once caused trouble. I wanted to laugh, but the laughter caught in my throat and turned into something harder. I looked out my window toward the marina. The sun lit up rows of boats rocking gently in their slips. At least 40 of them. Some older, some larger than mine. Many in worse condition, yet none of those were called out. Just mine. Only mine. I grabbed my jacket and walked down toward Slip 23. The morning air was crisp, the kind of air that reminded me why I had moved to Florida in the first place. But the closer I got, the heavier each step felt. She was there. Angela Brooks, HOA president, always dressed like she was headed to a boardroom instead of a marina. Her smile was practiced, but it never touched her eyes. "Mr. Harris," she said, with her voice sharp and sweet at the same time, "I assume you received our letter about your situation." Situation. She said it like I was hiding a weapon. I looked at her, then at my boat, white with blue trim, shining from a fresh coat of paint. I had cared for it meticulously, every line clean, every tool stored properly. Nothing about it screamed disturbance. Nothing about it diminished this community. But Angela gestured toward it like it was a monster. She claimed it dominated the visual landscape. I gestured at 6 other boats bigger than mine. Some rusted, some falling apart. Yet somehow mine was the problem. She said something that stuck with me. Sometimes the spirit of community rules matters more than the letter of the law. The spirit, not the law itself. That was when I knew. There was no actual rule, no clause, no bylaw, just her will. And she wanted me gone. I should have walked away. But her condescending tone awakened something in me, something stubborn. "Ms. Brooks," I said, "if you want me to move my boat, then you need a rule in writing. Until then, my boat stays." Her smile faltered. For a moment, I saw the mask slip, and behind it was something harder, something calculating. She muttered about legal action, about enforcement. But I had already stopped listening. Because as I looked, around the marina, I noticed something strange. The property signs. They were not HOA branded. They looked generic, corporate. As if this place did not actually belong to the association at all. The thought gnawed at me. Could it be possible that Angela was bluffing, that she had no real authority here? The days passed, and another letter arrived. Colder, harsher. Threats of $500 daily fines starting on day 30. They even attached photographs of my boat taken at angles meant to exaggerate its size to make it look monstrous. Wide-angle shots at twilight with shadows stretched, long as if my fishing boat were a villain in some horror film. I should have been angry. Instead, I felt something else. Violated. Someone had been sneaking around the marina snapping pictures of my property, watching me without my knowledge. That night, I sat in my office staring at the photographs. My boat looked alien like it did. Not even belonged to me. I thought of neighbors walking past, smiling, waving, pretending to be friendly. Was one of them hiding a camera? Reporting back to Angela. The thought turned my stomach. But I am not the type to fold under pressure. I have friends in the marine contracting business, access to county records, so I started digging, and what I found only deepened the mystery. The marina was not listed as HOA property at all. It was owned by something called Coastal Properties LLC, a company registered just 2 years ago. Angela had become president 3 years ago. A year later, this company appeared. The timing was too perfect. I leaned back in my chair as the pieces started to form. Angela was not protecting the community. She was protecting something else. Something hidden. And if I pushed just a little harder, I might uncover what it was. The next day, she cornered me at the mailbox. Her tone syrupy, her words sharp. "Mr. Harris, you are making this much harder than it needs to be. Just move the boat and we can all get along like civilized neighbors." Civilized. The way she said it stung, as if I were some outsider unfit for this place. I looked her in the eyes and said, "If you cannot show me the rule, then I am done here. My boat stays." She stormed off, but I could feel it. This was no longer about a boat. It was about control, and I was about to challenge hers in a way she never expected. The third letter arrived like a blade slipped under the door. This time, the envelope carried the heavy seal of a law firm, McCoy and Associates, the kind of name meant to scare you before you even opened the page. I sat at my kitchen table staring at it for a long while before breaking the seal. The words inside were colder than any I had read before. They spoke of legal action, civil damages, the protection of community values, all of it dressed in the armor of legal jargon that looked powerful but said nothing real. Not once did it cite an actual rule. Not once did it prove that my boat was in violation of anything. But that was not the point. The point was fear. They wanted me to fold under the weight of intimidation, to see the words legal action and imagine my life crumbling under debt and courtrooms. I closed the letter and exhaled slowly. The fear was there, yes. But stronger than the fear was something else. Anger. That night, I pulled up the county property, records again. My eyes scanned over the name Coastal Properties LLC again and again. It nagged at me. It smelled like a cover, so I dug deeper. Corporation registries, tax filings, ownership disclosures. Hours slipped into the night until my eyes burned and the coffee had gone cold beside me. And then I found it. The name Hannah Brooks. It hit me like a wave. Brooks, Angela Brooks, her daughter. 26 years old, a law student at the University of Florida. The entire company, Coastal Properties LLC, belonged to her. I sat back stunned. My mind raced through every encounter with Angela, every condescending word, every insistence about community standards. It was never about aesthetics. It was never about rules. It was about money, about power, about family. Angela had been manufacturing crises, creating problems that only her daughter could solve by conveniently buying properties below market value. It was a scheme, elegant in its cruelty, disguised as community management, but in reality a family business empire built on fraud. I stared at those documents for a long time. My hands trembled. I had lived here 12 years, trusted her leadership, smiled at neighborhood gatherings. She had looked me in the eye, pretending to care about this community while plotting to drain it for profit. The betrayal was personal. I knew I had to confront her. Not in whispers, not in rumor, but with proof. I sent her an email attaching every document I had uncovered. My subject line was simple. Interesting family business you have there. 2 hours later, my phone rang. Her voice came sharp through the line. She tried to sound calm, but I could hear the panic. "Mr. Harris, my daughter's business dealings are separate from my HOA responsibilities. Your harassment will be reported to the authorities." Harassment. That word almost made me laugh. After weeks of letters, threats, surveillance photographs, she dared to call me the aggressor. But what mattered most was her tone. Not calm, not confident, afraid. She knew I had found the truth. I did not back down. I told her these were public records, that residents had a right to know who truly owned the marina. Her silence was loud. She hung up without answering, and in that silence, I knew I had struck deep. The next day, I filed for a formal HOA board meeting. I worded my request politely but firmly. The community deserved answers about marina ownership, about fee structures, about authority, and I made sure to copy every board member, not just Angela. Word spread fast. Neighbors stopped me on the street, whispering questions. What did you find? Is it true? Has she been lying all this time? Some looked afraid to speak too loud. Others looked hopeful, as if they had been waiting for someone to finally challenge her. The cracks in Angela's power had begun to show. When the meeting day arrived, the room was packed. I had never seen so many residents gathered in one place, faces I had known for years, some friendly, some cautious, all curious. Angela sat at the front, flanked by her loyal allies, but I could see the tension in her jaw, the tightness in her grip on the papers before her. She knew what was coming. I stood and presented the documents. Every registration, every property record, the timeline that showed Angela's rise to HOA. President followed by her daughter's sudden acquisitions. I watched the faces in the crowd change. Confusion, shock, anger, betrayal. Angela's smile cracked for the first time since I had known her. She insisted that even if her daughter owned the property, the HOA still had the right to set standards. She claimed I was twisting facts. But then Jim Patterson, one of her own board members, leaned forward, his voice quiet but firm. This does not add up. The room fell silent. The power shifted in that single moment. Her own board was questioning her. Her mask was slipping, and she knew it. I pressed again. If there is no rule in writing, then this conversation is over. My boat stays. "Ha," residents murmured. Some nodded, others clapped softly. Angela's face burned red, but she could not answer. That night another letter came, this one harsher than ever, a cease and desist from McCoy and Associates, demanding that I stop making defamatory claims, demanding I comply, threatening civil damages. Yet still never denying the truth I had uncovered. They did not deny because they could not. Instead of fear, I felt resolve. They had overplayed their hand, and now I would play mine. I filed formal complaints with the county, with the state. I drafted a timeline of evidence so detailed, so clear that no investigator could ignore it. Fraud, conflict of interest, breach of fiduciary duty. It was all there. Piece by piece, the picture had formed. A mother and daughter orchestrating a financial scheme under the guise of community management. As I submitted those documents, I felt a strange mix of exhaustion and fire. I was tired, yes. But I also knew this was bigger than me, bigger than my boat. This was about the truth, about standing up when others stay silent. Sometimes people think silence means weakness, that compliance means stupidity. But I had stayed silent for 12 years, and now I was done. The battle was no longer about a single fishing boat. It was about exposing corruption, and I had just lit the fuse. The days after the meeting felt heavy, like the air itself was waiting for something to break. Neighbors walked slower, eyes darting glances at each other as whispers moved through the community. Some avoided me, afraid of being connected to the storm. Others approached me quietly, thanking me for asking the questions they had been too scared to voice. But beneath it all, there was tension building like thunder gathering before the strike. Angela was not silent. She doubled down, calling residents one by one, spinning stories about me. She warned them I was dangerous, that I would drive legal costs through the roof, that property values would collapse if I continued my so-called attacks. Her voice on. Those calls was sharp, desperate. Some neighbors told me she sounded frantic, like someone clinging to a cliff edge, but still she pushed. And then another letter arrived. This one from McCoy and Associates again, but different. The tone sharper, The demands harsher. They accused me of harassment, defamation, interference with board operations. They demanded I remove my boat within 7 days. They threatened civil damages so high they could bury me alive. But even in all that fire, not once did they deny the documents I had revealed. Not once did they address the truth. That silence told me everything. I sat at my desk that night, staring at the stack of letters. The fear crept in again. What if they dragged me into court? What if the neighbors turned against me? What if I lost everything just for standing my ground? But then I remembered the look on Angela's face when Jim Patterson spoke up. The crack in her armor, the tremble in her voice when I confronted her with the evidence. That fear was not mine alone. It was hers too. So I pushed harder. Through my contacts in the marine contracting industry, I filed a formal complaint with the Florida Department of Business and Professional Regulation. I outlined every connection, every timeline, every dollar of HOA fees collected for a marina they did not even own. I cross-referenced property records, corporate filings, financial reports. The picture was damning: fraud, conspiracy, abuse of power. It was all there. And then came the discovery that changed everything. Buried deep in the original planning documents from 1992 was a line that no one had paid attention to in 30 years. A public access easement, 20 feet wide, running straight through the marina to the lake. Guaranteed rights for residents to use the water. Rights that could not be stripped away by any private company without formal government approval, which had never happened. I remember sitting in my office reading those words again and again. Public access easement. My heart pounded. It meant Angela and Hannah had been operating on sand. Their entire scheme rested on property they could never fully control. No exclusive fees, no threats of removal, no private restrictions. They had built a castle on a foundation of water, and now it was about to sink. I spent the next 48 hours learning everything I could about easement law. I called a property attorney. He explained that these rights were permanent, that they ran with the land forever unless abandoned through official proceedings. Not only was the easement still valid, but decades of continuous community use only strengthened it. The trap had been there all along. They just had not seen it, and now I would use it. I filed an emergency request with the county for a dock safety inspection. I cited concerns about structural integrity, liability risks. My contractor license gave me the authority to make the request, and within 24 hours, the county approved it, which meant I had the legal power to shut the marina down while the inspection was underway. The morning I arrived with caution. Tape and county notices the air was crisp and still. I walked slowly through the docks, taping off each section. Official signs hung from posts. Access prohibited pending inspection. In 2 hours, the marina transformed from a community hub into a restricted zone. The silence was eerie. Boats sat trapped in their slips. The water lay still untouched. By noon, the calls began. Angela's phone lit up with angry residents demanding answers. A birthday party canceled. A fishing tournament postponed. Families with guests left stranded on shore. The very community Angela claimed to protect now turned against her. Not because of me, but because of her lies unraveling before their eyes. Angela stormed into the marina office that afternoon shouting about revoking permits, threatening to sue the county itself. She called officials 3 times demanding they overrule me, but the county held firm. The permit was valid. The inspection was lawful. Her threats had no weight. She could not claim the marina was HOA property, because the records said otherwise. She could not claim residents had no rights, because the easement proved they did. Every word she spoke tangled her deeper in contradictions. I watched her from a distance, her shoulders tense, her voice shrill, her hands shaking, the queen of the neighborhood stripped of her crown. And for the first time, I felt something shift. The power was no longer hers. That night, neighbors knocked on my door. Some brought copies of their own HOA bills asking questions. Where had the Marina fees really gone? Was it even legal? Could they demand refunds? Their fear had turned into anger, and their anger into resolve. Angela was losing her grip, and she knew it. I sat on my porch long after dark listening to the quiet lake. The yellow caution tape fluttered in the breeze across the marina. I thought about what I had done, about the storm I had unleashed. The fight had grown bigger than me, bigger than my boat. It was about a system built on lies. And I had just torn the first hole in the dam. But even as the night settled, I felt it. The danger. Because Angela was cornered now. And a cornered enemy is always the most dangerous. Monday morning came with a weight I could feel in my bones. The county inspector arrived not just with a clipboard, but with authority that Angela could not touch. His eyes were sharp, his questions direct. He was not here to smooth things over. He was here to dig. As he walked the docks making notes, I followed in silence, my heart racing with every word he spoke. Electrical systems out of code. Dock flotation deteriorating. Fire safety equipment inadequate. These were not small mistakes. These were dangerous violations that could have put lives at risk. But the bigger blow was yet to come. The inspector revealed that Hannah had been running the marina as a commercial business without licenses, permits, or insurance. No legal coverage, no zoning approval, no environmental clearance, nothing. For years, residents had been paying fees into a system that had no legal right to exist. The air grew heavy as I realized just how deep this fraud ran. That afternoon, a local reporter appeared at the marina. She had caught wind of the investigation through scanner chatter, and now she wanted the full story. Her camera flashed, her pen scribbled. By Wednesday, the headlines spread across the region. HOA power grab. Mother and daughter accused of profiting from community property. Photos of Angela's home, copies of corporate records, a timeline of acquisitions. It was all out in the open. The community exploded. Over 200 residents flooded the emergency HOA meeting. I had lived here 12 years and never seen that many people gather for anything. Not for festivals, not for parties. But now they came with fury in their eyes and questions on their lips. Angela walked in pale and stiff, her allies close but shaken. She tried to speak. She tried to defend herself, but her voice trembled, her hands shook. I laid the documents on the table again. Corporate records, property transfers, the public easement, the conflicts of interest. I spoke calmly but firmly. I told them this was not about a boat, not about aesthetics. It was about fraud. It was about betrayal. Angela's words crumbled. She insisted the accusations were lies. She said I was a troublemaker, that I wanted to destroy the neighborhood. But no one believed her anymore. Not after the letters, not after the photographs, not after the inspector. Her last fragments of authority shattered in that room. The residents demanded a vote of no confidence. Voices rose together louder than I had ever heard. Hands lifted. The result was overwhelming. 187 against her. Only 11 for her, and even those 11 looked ashamed. Angela's reign was over, but even in her defeat there was no apology, no admission. That night she resigned with a single-line email. No words of regret, no explanation, just silence. Yet I knew it was not finished, because legal wheels had begun to turn. The county audit revealed $68,000 of HOA fees collected for marina maintenance that the HOA did not even own. The state began investigating fraud conspiracy wire transfers. Angela faced criminal charges. Hannah faced expulsion from law school. Their empire crumbling brick by brick, and the law firm that had sent me those threatening letters, McCoy and Associates, now faced their own storm. Conflict of interest violations, ethics complaints, license suspension, the walls were closing in on all of them. But as satisfying as it felt, there was something heavier pressing on me. The weight of community trust. Neighbors now turned to me, asking what comes next. How do we rebuild? How do we stop this from ever happening again? I had never wanted to be a leader. I had only wanted to keep my boat. Yet now I was standing at the center of a movement I had never asked for. The new board formed quickly. Residents demanded transparency, financial audits, clear rules written in plain words. They asked me to serve as an advisor, not a board member but a guide, to ensure the mistakes of the past would not return. I agreed, because after seeing what power in the wrong hands could do, I could not walk away. The Marina returned to the people. Hannah was forced to sell it back at a loss. Restrictions were put in place, ensuring no Brooks family member could touch community property for 10 years. The docks repaired, the safety equipment upgraded, the water once again open to all. Yet, even in victory, I could not shake a lingering thought. Angela had looked at me one last time as she drove past the Marina. Her car slowed. Our eyes met. In her gaze, I saw anger, defeat, but also something else. A quiet promise. This was not the end. That night I sat on my boat watching the sunset. Families returned to the docks, children laughing, lines cast into the water, music drifting across, the breeze, the community alive again, stronger. But I could not forget that darkness had lived here, hidden in plain sight, smiling, shaking hands, weaving lies. I whispered to myself a truth I had learned. Sometimes people mistake silence for weakness, but silence is only patience waiting for the right moment to strike. Angela thought she could control me, control all of us. But in the end, it was patience that destroyed her. Not rage, not violence, just persistence. Still, as the lake shimmered under fading light, I wondered what price I had yet to pay. Because when you pull corruption into the open, you never control where the light spreads. And I feared that somewhere beyond the calm of the water, another storm was already gathering. The morning after Angela resigned felt strange, almost too quiet, as if the neighborhood was holding its breath. For years, she had been the center of everything. Every rule, every demand, every letter carried her fingerprints. And now, she was gone. But peace did not follow. Instead, a new kind of storm began, one carried by investigators, lawyers, and auditors. County officials arrived with boxes of documents. They combed through years of financial records, HOA fees earmarked for Marina maintenance, transfers routed through accounts that did not belong to the community, $68,000 misused. Residents whispered numbers in hushed voices. Some were furious, some looked sick to their stomachs. Fraud was no longer rumor. It was fact. State investigators soon followed. They used words that chilled the air: wire fraud, conspiracy, breach of fiduciary duty, felony charges possible. Angela's once polished life now unraveled in the harsh light of discovery. Her retirement savings drained by lawyers. Her reputation shattered in every circle she once ruled. And Hannah, the girl whose name had hidden in the records for years, she now faced the collapse of everything she had dreamed. The law school opened an ethics review. Expulsion loomed. The state bar whispered about blacklisting her before she ever practiced. Properties under her name frozen, seized, stripped away one by one. The empire crumbled faster than it had been built. The law firm McCoy and Associates did not escape either. Their letters had once rattled me, shaking my confidence, but now they stood accused of enabling fraud, conflict of interest violations. Ethics boards summoned them, their license suspended, their proud names stained across the headlines. And yet, even as justice tightened its grip, my own life did not feel lighter. Neighbors came daily knocking on my door. Some brought questions, some brought fears, others brought quiet gratitude. They said I had saved the community, that I had stopped something that could have stolen everything from us. But inside me, the weight grew heavier. I had never wanted to be anyone's savior. I had only wanted to keep my boat safe. The new board asked me to guide them, to ensure transparency, to rebuild trust. I agreed because walking away would have been betrayal of everything we had fought for. Together we crafted rules with clear words, no hidden clauses, no vague spirits of the law. Every resident could read them and know exactly where they stood, but the past still lingered like a shadow. Angela's face as she drove past that final day haunted me. The look in her eyes. Defeat, yes, but also rage, a silent vow that she would not forget. Sometimes enemies do not vanish when you defeat them. They retreat waiting for a new opening. I tried to find peace. I sat on my boat at Slip 23 watching sunsets over the water. Families returned. Children fished from the docks. Neighbors laughed where once they had whispered. The Marina lived again. But in those quiet moments, I could still hear the echo of footsteps sneaking to take photographs, the rustle of envelopes filled with threats, the sharp tone of Angela's voice calling me uncivilized. These memories clung like shadows that refused to lift. And then came the settlements. The HOA's insurance company reached out, $22,000 for harassment damages and legal costs. The number meant little compared to the validation it carried. It was proof written in ink that I had been wronged, that my fight had been justified. I held that check in my hands and felt something deeper than victory. I felt dignity restored. Angela's house went up for sale within 2 months. Moving trucks came in the night carrying out the life she had built on lies. She sold at a loss, scrambling to cover her legal fees. Neighbors watched from porches. Some shook their heads. Some muttered words of pity. But no one defended her anymore. Hannah was forced to sell the Marina back to the community. $45,000 below market value. A punishment written not in words, but in numbers. The board signed documents forbidding her or any Brooks family member from touching community property for 10 years. Her empire collapsed to dust. But victory did not bring silence. Reporters still called. Other communities reached out telling me similar stories. Manufactured crises, sudden property sales, legal letters designed to scare. Angela and Hannah were not the only ones. The patterns stretched wider than I had imagined. And in those stories, I heard echoes of our own. One evening as I worked on my boat, a neighbor approached quietly. He said, "Thank you." His voice trembled. He admitted he had been too afraid to speak up. He thought nothing could change. But seeing me fight and win gave him courage. That moment hit me harder than any settlement. Because I realized this fight was not only mine, it belonged to everyone who had ever felt powerless against the weight of manufactured authority. Still at night I could not sleep easily. I knew Angela was facing charges. I knew Hannah's ambitions were destroyed. But people like them rarely stop completely. They adapt. They find new ground. And I could not shake the thought that somewhere she still plotted her revenge. The sunset painted the lake gold one evening as I sat on the deck. I thought about everything we had endured. The letters, the threats, the meetings. The truth uncovered piece by piece. I thought about patience, about silence, about the way strength can hide until the moment it is needed. Sometimes justice is not loud. It is steady. It does not shout. It endures. And in the end, it wins. But as the waves lapped gently against my boat, I felt it deep inside. This was not the end of the story. It was only the close of a chapter. Because when corruption is exposed, it never truly dies. It waits. It shifts. It searches for another place to root. And I feared the battle was far from over. The weeks that followed felt like living in the aftermath of a storm. The winds had passed, but debris still littered the ground. Angela was gone, yes. Hannah stripped of her empire, yes. But the community was not the same. Trust once broken does not return overnight. At board meetings, people spoke in hushed voices. Every financial report was dissected line by line. Suspicion hung in the air like a fog. I walked the marina often, watching families laugh again, children learning to fish, couples sitting at the edge with feet dangling above the water, life returning. But beneath the joy was something else, a scar, a reminder of how close we had come to losing everything. The county investigation pressed forward. More layers peeled away. They discovered that Angela and Hannah had replicated their scheme in other neighborhoods. 6 communities within 50 miles had fallen into the same trap. Manufactured crises, properties sold under market value, residents misled by the same soothing lies. The number chilled me. This was no accident. This was a pattern, a machine, designed to profit off trust. The media painted them as con artists. Their faces appeared on front pages, their names repeated on evening news. Mother and daughter accused of million-dollar fraud. Neighbors who once feared Angela now spat her name like a curse. And yet even as her empire collapsed, I still feared her silence, because silence can be louder than noise. At night I lay awake, wondering, what if she still had connections? What if McCoy and Associates were not the only lawyers in her pocket? What if she found another community far from here willing to believe her polished smile? Justice was moving, yes, but people like Angela know how to survive. One evening, as the sun dipped low, a knock came at my door. It was Mary Williams, the school teacher from down the street. She looked nervous, glancing over her shoulder before speaking. She said Angela had called her, not long ago, warning her to stay away from me, claiming I was dangerous. Mary's hands shook as she told me. I realized then that even stripped of her title, Angela was still playing her games, trying to isolate me, to weaken me. But it did not work, because neighbors now knew the truth, and truth has a way of spreading once it escapes. The new board worked tirelessly. They opened financial books to every resident. They posted meeting notes on bulletin boards. They invited questions at every gathering. And slowly, faith began to return. Real estate agents reported interest climbing. Buyers wanted homes here, not because of the lake or the docks, but because of what the community had done, because we had stood up, because we had proven corruption could be defeated. I tried to enjoy that victory. I really did. But late at night, I still heard Angela's voice. I still saw her eyes the day she drove past me one last time. Rage, resentment, a silent promise. The state attorney's office announced charges: fraud, conspiracy, breach of duty. Angela faced years in prison if convicted. Hannah, too. Their assets frozen, their properties seized, their lives unraveling under the weight of the very system they had tried to manipulate. It should have felt like closure, but it did not. Because I knew what it had cost me, my peace, my quiet mornings, my sense of safety in my own neighborhood, all shattered. Even as justice came, I could not go back to who I had been before that first letter arrived. Neighbors called me a hero. They said I had saved them. But inside, I felt only exhaustion. Heroes choose their battles. I had only chosen to keep my boat. The battle had found me. One afternoon, I sat at slip 23, polishing the rails, when a boy no older than 12 stopped to watch. He asked if the stories were true, that I had shut down the Marina, that I had beaten Angela. I smiled faintly and told him yes, but inside I wondered what kind of story he would remember. Would he remember a man fighting for justice, or just a neighbor caught in endless conflict? The boy asked if he could sit on the boat. I nodded. He sat quietly staring at the water. Then he said something that struck me deeper than any headline or settlement. He said, "I am glad you did not give up, because if you gave up, then maybe I would too when I grow up." Those words stayed with me long after he left. Perhaps this fight was not about boats or marinas or fraud. Perhaps it was about something bigger. The lesson that corruption can be challenged, that ordinary people can stand, that silence is not the same as surrender. Still, the fear lingered, because battles leave scars, and scars whisper long after wounds heal. The sun set red that evening. I watched it fade across Lake Harmony. My boat rocked gently. Neighbors gathered at the dock sharing stories. Laughter carried across the water. For a moment it felt normal again, peaceful, but I knew peace is fragile. And somewhere in the shadows, Angela was still watching. The trial did not come quickly. Justice rarely does. Months passed as investigators built their case. Each day brought new documents, new testimonies, new layers peeled away from the life Angela had crafted so carefully. I watched from a distance as the world she created turned into rubble. Yet even as her empire fell, I could not shake the fear that she still had moves left to play. Neighbors asked me constantly for updates. Some wanted reassurance. Others wanted blood. They spoke of prison time, restitution, punishment. But I often wondered if true justice could ever be found in a courtroom. Could numbers on a balance sheet heal betrayal? Could prison walls erase years of manipulation? Angela's lawyers fought hard. They argued technicalities. They painted me as a disgruntled homeowner with a grudge. They claimed the easement was irrelevant. They said her daughter's company was separate. But each argument unraveled under the weight of evidence. The timeline was too clear, the documents too damning. Every lie exposed another. One day I sat alone in the Marina office reviewing copies of the old financial records. I traced lines of numbers, highlighted transfers, scribbled notes in the margins. My head ached, my chest tightened, and then I paused. I realized something important. This battle had consumed me. What began with a single letter about my boat had grown into a war stretching across courtrooms and headlines. And somewhere along the way, I had lost the quiet man who simply loved fishing on the weekends. But there was no turning back now. The county inspector returned with final reports. Safety violations confirmed, licenses missing, insurance non-existent. It was the final nail. Hannah's name appeared on every document. Her signature, her initials, her mark. The law student who thought she was untouchable now faced the collapse of her future before it had begun. The community prepared for another vote. This time, not about Angela's position, but about structural reforms. Mandatory audits, limited board terms, transparent spending. Residents filled the hall again, and this time the air carried not anger but determination. People wanted not just revenge, but rebirth. I stood at the back watching. My heart swelled as I realized something. Out of corruption had come unity. Out of betrayal had come resolve. Angela had tried to divide us. Instead, she had forged us together, stronger than we had ever been. Still, her shadow lingered. One evening after the meeting, I returned to my home to find an envelope on my doorstep. No name, no address, just plain paper sealed tight. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a single sheet, words typed in black. "You think you won. This is not over." My breath caught, my chest tightened. The paper slipped from my fingers, looked around into the darkness beyond the streetlights. Every shadow seemed alive, every sound a threat. I felt anger rising, but beneath it, fear. Because whoever left that note wanted me to know they were close, watching, waiting. I told no one, not yet. Some battles are fought in silence. The trial date drew near. Reporters swarmed the community again, microphones shoved in faces, cameras, flashing. They wanted sound bites. They wanted drama. But behind the spectacle, real lives were unraveling. Angela's house sat empty, stripped bare by moving trucks. Hannah disappeared from campus. McCoy and associates locked their doors. The night before the hearing, I sat on my boat staring at the lake. The water calm, the stars bright. I thought about everything that had led here, the letters, the lies, the confrontation at the mailbox. the discovery of the easement, the caution tape that shut the Marina down. Each step etched in memory. And now the final step stood before me. Sometimes victory feels less like triumph and more like survival. I did not feel proud. I did not feel powerful. I felt tired. But I knew one truth. If I had not stood up, nothing would have changed. If I had folded at the first letter, Angela would still be in control. The fraud would still be hidden. And the community would still be blind. The next morning I walked into the courthouse. The halls echoed with footsteps. My heart pounded. Residents filled benches behind me, offering quiet nods of support. Angela sat at the defense table, her face pale, her eyes hollow. For the first time she looked not powerful, not polished, but human, fragile. The judge entered. The gavel struck. The trial began. The courtroom was heavy with silence as testimony began. Witnesses stepped forward one by one. Neighbors who had once smiled politely now spoke with steady voices about intimidation, about letters, about money that vanished into nothing. The county inspector read his findings aloud. Electrical hazards, unsafe docks, no insurance. His words echoed through the chamber, sharp and undeniable. I sat listening, heart pounding with every revelation. I had lived this story. I had uncovered each piece. Yet hearing it laid bare in front of a judge and jury was something different. It was not just my battle anymore. It belonged to everyone who had ever trusted Angela's smile and Hannah's. Silence. The defense tried to fight. They painted Angela as misunderstood. A woman who only wanted to protect property values. They claimed the documents were coincidences, that Hannah's purchases were legal investments. But each time the prosecution revealed another thread, the defense unraveled. The easement, the financial transfers, the shell company records, the photographs taken to distort reality. Each fact cut deeper until there was no mask left to hide behind. Angela herself took the stand. For years she had commanded rooms with confidence, but now her hands shook as she clutched the rail. Her voice faltered. She spoke of community spirit, of misunderstandings, but her eyes betrayed her. They darted, they trembled, and everyone could see it. The truth she had buried for years had finally clawed its way into the light. The jury left for deliberation. Hours dragged. My chest tightened with every tick of the clock. Neighbors whispered around me. Some prayed, some stared ahead in silence. And then the doors opened. The jury filed back in. The foreman rose, guilty. The word rang out like thunder. Guilty on fraud, guilty on conspiracy, guilty on breach of duty. Hannah, too. Their empire reduced to rubble by a single word. The courtroom erupted. Some gasped, some wept. Others sighed with relief. I sat still, my hands on my knees, my eyes closed. I felt no triumph, only release. A weight lifting from my shoulders that had pressed for too long. Sentencing followed weeks later. Angela faced years behind bars. Hannah banned from ever practicing law. McCoy and Associates suspended fines stripped of prestige. The community awarded restitution. The Marina returned. The fraud exposed, and yet even then I could not call it victory. Because battles like these do not leave you whole. They leave scars, memories that wake you at night, shadows that whisper even in peace. I returned to Slip 23 the evening, after the sentencing. The lake shimmered under the fading sun. Children laughed, casting lines into the water. Families gathered for a fishing tournament planned by the new board. The docks alive again, not with fear, but with joy. My boat rocked gently. Still mine, still safe. Angela was gone, her house empty, her name cursed in whispers. But as I watched the water, I remembered the note left on my doorstep. "You think you won? This is not over." The words lingered like smoke. Perhaps she meant them, perhaps not. Either way, I had learned to live with shadows. That night I sat on the deck of my boat, watching stars scatter across the dark sky. I thought of the boy who once told me he was glad I did not give up. I thought of Mary, who confessed she had been too afraid to speak. I thought of neighbors who now stood taller because someone had shown them corruption could fall. And I realized something. The fight had never been just mine. It belonged to all of us. Sometimes kindness is mistaken for weakness. Silence mistaken for surrender. But true strength waits. It endures. It chooses the right moment. And when it rises, it does not only protect itself, it protects everyone around it. As the lake grew still, I understood the lesson of it all. The best revenge is not anger, not even victory. It is justice served through patience, through persistence, through truth. And when justice shines, it does more than punish the guilty. It gives hope to the silent. The community healed slowly but surely. Trust rebuilt. Laughter returned. The Marina once more a place of unity, not division. And as the months passed, estate agents spoke of rising values. Families sought homes here not because of luxury, but because of resilience. Because this neighborhood had proven that corruption could not stand forever. I leaned back against the deck rail, breathing in the cool night air, my boat safe, my dignity intact, my community stronger. It had cost me peace. It had cost me sleep. But it had given something greater, proof that standing up matters. The fight was over, but the lesson would remain forever. When you stand against bullies, when you refuse to bow to false power, when you shine light on hidden lies, you do more than defend yourself. You make it easier for others to rise. You show them silence is not surrender. You show them change is possible. The lake rippled softly. The stars reflected on the water. And for the first time in months, I felt calm. Truly calm. Justice had been served, and the story that began with a single letter had ended with a truth no one could deny. You've heard this confession. Now wait until you hear the next one.